All right, so you want to dive into this Stacey Abrams thing, this green grant controversy?
Yeah, let's unpack it.
$2 billion green grant.
A lot of research here.
It's a lot, and it's confusing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and
let's try to break it down.
it all starts with this $20 billion
Yeah,
greenhouse gas reduction fund,
the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund.
which the Biden administration set up
Okay,
back in 2022 as part of the Inflation Reduction Act.
right.
The goal was to create a green bank to support climate change initiatives.
To support initiatives combating climate change.
Yeah.
Okay, so that sounds good right
On
there.
the surface, yeah.
Okay.
It was designed to be a cornerstone of Biden's climate agenda,
Mm-hmm.
fueling projects related to renewable energy, emissions reduction.
The whole 9 yards.
Yeah,
Okay, so far so good.
right.
But then things get a little interesting.
Yeah,
Fast forward to late 2023,
okay.
a brand new nonprofit
Hmm.
called Power Forward Communities pops up.
Power forward communities.
And bam, they land a whopping $2 billion grant from this fund.
Wow.
But here's the catch.
Okay.
Before the grant, they reported a measly $100 in revenue.
$100.
$100.
Wow.
It's like they hit the jackpot out of nowhere.
And that right there is why everyone's raising eyebrows.
Yeah.
It begs the question,
Yeah.
how did a group with barely any operating history get their hands on such a massive chunk of change?
Right. It's like winning the lottery the day after you buy your first ticket.
Exactly.
And of course, the Trump administration, specifically the EPA under Lee Zeldin,
Right.
smelled something fishy and launched an investigation.
It did.
They claimed that the Biden administration basically stashed the entire $20 billion at Citibank,
Interesting.
potentially limiting oversight of the fund.
Yeah, if you connect the dots, that move potentially limited oversight of
Right.
the fund.
Yeah.
Imagine trying to reclaim those funds now.
Oh, my God.
It's like trying to get your deposit back from a bank in a different dimension.
It's like it's in a black hole or something.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got a huge pot of money, a brand new organization, scoring a massive grant and allegations of shady dealings.
Right.
Enter Stacey Abrams, stage left.
There she is.
Now, she's a big name in Democratic politics, and wouldn't you know it, she's got some pretty close ties to power forward communities.
Not just connected.
Okay.
Abrams was a vocal champion of Biden's green energy agenda, and she holds a senior counsel role at Rewiring America,
Rewiring America.
a key player in the Power Forward Communities Coalition.
Okay, so it's not just a casual acquaintance situation.
No.
And it gets even more intertwined.
Okay.
Abrams also founded a couple of other organizations.
Right.
The Southern Economic Advancement Project
Yeah.
and Fair Count,
Uh-huh.
both of which are partners of Power Forward Communities.
And to add another layer of intrigue, the Southern Economic Advancement Project is fiscally sponsored by the Tide Center.
The Tide Center.
They've got a history of backing various left-leaning activist groups, which has fueled speculation about potential political motives behind the grant.
Right, so now it's not just about the money.
No.
It's about ideology and influence.
Yeah, exactly.
And as if things weren't tangled enough already,
Right.
we've got big labor unions,
Oh, boy.
like the American Federation of Teachers and the AFL-CIO,
Yeah.
joining the Power Forward Communities Party as partners.
As partners.
It's worth noting that these unions have been increasingly vocal about the need for green jobs and a just transition to a clean energy economy.
Yeah, they're likely seeing this as an opportunity to secure jobs for their members in these emerging green industries.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right.
But you know what they say, follow the money?
Always.
This whole thing has gotten so convoluted, it's hard to know what's genuine concern for the environment and what's political maneuvering.
Absolutely. And it raises questions about potential conflicts of interest. Both Abrams and Randy Weingarten, the head honcho at the American Federation of Teachers,
Yeah.
sit on the advisory board of Climate Power.
Climate power.
Remember that group?
Yeah.
They supported Kamala Harris's presidential campaign.
Right.
You can see how these overlapping relationships create a web that's hard to untangle.
Talk about a tangled web.
Right.
And let's not forget Daniel Turner, the head of Power the Future.
Oh, yeah.
He's not mincing words. He's straight up calling this potential fraud.
Wow.
He points to Power Forward Communities' lack of experience and that sudden influx of cash.
Yeah, it's certainly understandable why he's raising those concerns.
Yeah.
It definitely doesn't look good.
Right.
And to make things even more complicated, the Trump administration isn't just sitting on its hands.
Right.
They're actively trying to claw back that $20 billion.
With Zeldin vowing to investigate this whole thing from top to bottom.
From top to bottom.
Yeah, it's like a political thriller unfolding right before our eyes.
It really is.
One administration sets up this elaborate funding scheme.
Right.
The next one comes in swinging.
Yeah.
And in the middle, you've got this brand new organization, powerful political figures, and a mountain of taxpayer dollars.
It really highlights the intense partisan divide in our country,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to issues like climate change and government spending.
So where do we go from here? This is just the tip of the iceberg, right?
You got it. We've just scratched the surface.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've laid out the players and the plot twists, but I'm sure you're wondering, like, why should I care about this whole green grant drama? What does it have to do with me?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Well, think of it this way. This case is like a giant magnifying glass over how our tax dollars are being used. Are there enough safeguards in place to prevent misuse, especially when we're talking billions?
Yeah, it's like you're saying this whole situation is a wake-up call about transparency and accountability in government.
Exactly. And it goes beyond just this one grant. This whole controversy could impact public trust in government initiatives, especially those aimed at tackling climate change.
Yeah, you know, it makes you wonder if people start thinking these programs are just political chess games, will they be less likely to support them?
It's a valid concern, and let's not forget the energy industry angle.
Right.
We've got Daniel Turner from Power the Future crying foul, calling this out-and-out fraud.
Yeah.
He's a big advocate for traditional energy sources, so it's no surprise he's skeptical of these massive green initiatives.
Right. And his perspective reminds us that there's a whole debate raging about the best way to tackle climate change and energy policy.
Absolutely.
Are we moving too quickly away from traditional energy sources? Are these green initiatives really the answer?
These are questions we need to be asking, and the way the Biden administration structured the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund adds fuel to the fire. They essentially parked that money outside of direct government control,
Right.
which raises questions about oversight and accountability.
It's almost like they were trying to make it harder for a future administration to touch that money. Is that even legal?
The legality is a whole other can of worms, but it definitely feeds into the narrative that they were trying to shield these funds from scrutiny. And remember, all of this is happening against a backdrop of extreme political polarization.
Yeah.
Climate change has become a partisan battleground, and this case is just pouring gasoline on the fire.
And let's be real, Stacey Abrams being in the mix just throws another log on that fire.
Definitely.
She's a rising star in the Democratic Party, and her involvement with power-forward communities is making her a target for critics who are crying foul about political favoritism.
Her close ties to this organization, along with her vocal support for Biden's green agenda, have made her a lightning rod for criticism.
Yeah.
Some see this as an example of political elites using taxpayer money to push their own agenda instead of actually tackling climate change.
Right. On the other hand, there are people who are passionate about investing in green energy and see this whole controversy as an attempt to sabotage those efforts.
Right.
They argue the focus should be on fighting climate change, not scoring political points.
It's a classic example of how, even with the best intentions, things can get messy when politics and money get involved.
Okay, so we've got political maneuvering, questionable funding, and a public that's more divided than ever. Where do we go from here? What could happen as a result of this investigation?
It's still early, and a lot depends on what the investigation uncovers. If they find solid evidence of wrongdoing or misuse of funds, there could be major legal and political consequences.
Yeah.
Think lawsuits, more investigations, maybe even criminal charges.
Wow, that would definitely shake things up.
Yeah.
But what if they don't find anything concrete? Will this just fizzle out and become another partisan blip on the radar?
Even if they don't find enough evidence for legal action, this case could still leave a lasting stain on how the public views government-funded climate initiatives. It could erode trust, making it even harder to build consensus and make real progress.
So it's a lose-lose situation.
Not necessarily. This whole mess also provides an opportunity to have a real conversation about transparency and accountability. What systems can we put in place to make sure that these funds are used effectively and ethically?
You know, I hadn't thought about it that way. Maybe this could be a catalyst for positive change.
It's possible, but we need to be willing to learn from our mistakes and hold each other accountable.
All right, so we've covered the grant the political players the potential outcomes, but there's another piece of this puzzle I want to explore.
Okay.
What about the labor unions? What's their stake in all of this?
That's a great question. Remember how we talked about how the American Federation of Teachers and the AFL-CIO are partners with power-forward communities?
Yeah.
They've been getting louder and louder about the need for green jobs and a just transition to a clean energy economy.
So are they just trying to grab a piece of the green pie for their members?
It's more nuanced than that they see this as a way to fight for their members' futures,
Okay.
to make sure they have a place in this new green world think job creation retraining programs, making sure working people aren't left behind in the rush to green energy.
That makes sense. But it also adds another layer of complexity.
Well, it does.
It does.
Yeah.
Now you've got these powerful unions potentially tangled up in this web of political connections and questionable funding. It's hard to know what's genuine concern for workers and what's self-serving opportunism.
You hit the nail on the head, and it raises those red flags about potential conflicts of interest. Again, are they really acting in the best interests of their members and the environment, or are they playing politics and prioritizing their own financial gain? These are questions investigators will need to dig into.
It seems like every time we uncover one layer of this story, another one pops up. It's like a never-ending onion of intrigue.
And that's the reality of complex issues like this. There are rarely easy answers we need. To be critical thinkers, consider all the perspectives, and be willing to dig deeper to understand the full picture.
Well said. So we've unpacked the political connections, the labor union angle, and the potential implications for climate policy and public trust. What are your final thoughts on this whole situation?
This case is a stark reminder that the road to a cleaner, more sustainable future is paved with potholes and detours. We're in uncharted territory, and there are going to be missteps and controversies along the way.
It's a messy journey, that's for sure.
It is, but it's a journey we have to take. The stakes are too high to give up. We need to learn from these experiences, adjust our course, and keep pushing for progress, even when it's tough.
That's a powerful message. This whole situation is a lot to take in. But it's crucial that we stay engaged and keep these conversations going.
Absolutely. The future of our planet depends on it.
Feels like we've been peeling back the layers of an onion, and with every layer we find more questions than answers.
That's a perfect way to put it. And it's important to remember this whole Stacey Abrams and the green energy grant saga is just one small piece of a much larger puzzle.
Right. It's easy to get lost in the weeds of this specific controversy, but we can't lose sight of the bigger picture, climate change, and how we're going to tackle it.
Exactly. This case is a prime example of why we need more transparency and accountability, especially when it comes to government funding for climate initiatives. We also need to be really careful about potential conflicts of interest.
It's like we need to build a system with checks and balances, but for climate action.
That's a good way to think about it. And unfortunately, the deep partisan divide in this country makes finding common ground on climate change feel like trying to herd cats.
It's frustrating. We need to be having productive conversations about solutions, but instead it often feels like we're stuck in this endless cycle of finger-pointing and accusations.
It's a real obstacle, and we can't ignore it. We need to figure out how to bridge these divides and start working together.
Well, this deep dive has definitely given us a lot to ponder. What are some key takeaways you would want our listeners to walk away with?
First and foremost, don't let the drama surrounding this one case overshadow the urgency of the climate crisis. This is a global challenge that demands our attention.
So don't get bogged down in the political mudslinging. Keep your eye on the prize.
Exactly. Second, remember that government funding always deserves close scrutiny, especially when we're talking about massive projects and initiatives. We need to demand transparency and make sure those taxpayer dollars are being used wisely and effectively.
Transparency is key. And what about those of us who aren't policymakers or politicians? What can we do to make a difference?
That's a great question, and it leads me to my final takeaway. Don't underestimate the power of individual action. We can all make choices in our daily lives that contribute to a more sustainable future. And we can hold our elected officials accountable, demanding that they prioritize climate action.
So stay informed, stay engaged, and don't be afraid to speak up for what you believe in.
Precisely. Change starts with each of us.
Well, there you have it, folks. A deep dive into the controversy surrounding Stacey Abrams and the $2 billion green energy grant. It's a complicated story with twists and turns, but hopefully this conversation has shed some light on the issue and given you some things to think about. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time.